The sleek glass and steel of the Manhattan skyscraper caught the brilliant rays of the morning sun, mirroring the fast-paced energy of the city below. Inside the grand auditorium of Cole Enterprises, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Camera flashes strobed like lightning, and whispered chatter echoed off the polished marble floors. Financial journalists, venture capitalists, and eager investors leaned forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on the empty podium. The headline dominating every global news stream was almost unbelievable. An anonymous holding company had quietly bought out a controlling 51% stake in the multi-billion-dollar corporation overnight. Before we plunge into the heart of this ruthless corporate takeover and the unforgettable secret behind it, hello and a warm welcome to all of our incredible listeners tuning in today. Whether you are listening from a rainy evening in London, a sunny afternoon in Sydney, a cozy living room in Toronto, or anywhere else around the globe, drop a comment down below and let me know where you are watching from today. I love reading your stories. If you're enjoying these deep, emotional, and thrilling audio journeys, take a quick second to hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon. Your support keeps this channel alive, and joining our family ensures you'll never miss a single chapter of these incredible tales. Today's story delves into the ruthless world of high-stakes corporate rivalry, a second-chance love, and the inspiring success of a woman who rose from the ruins of a broken heart. It is the story of a billionaire CEO who thought he owned the world, only to discover that the quiet ex-wife he let walk away had secretly built a global tech empire capable of bringing him to his knees. The heavy mahogany doors at the back of the conference floor burst open, cutting through the low hum of the crowd. Every camera swung toward the entrance. Walking down the aisle, flanked by top-tier legal counsel and private security, was a powerful businesswoman whose presence commanded absolute silence. She wore an impeccably tailored sapphire blue suit, her dark hair pinned back, her posture radiating absolute authority and quiet grace. Sitting at the main table, his hands trembling slightly against his crisp white collar, was Adrian Cole, the billionaire businessman who had ruled the tech industry for over a decade. He froze, his breath catching in his throat as his eyes met hers. It was Elena. The very woman he had dismissed 4 years ago. The woman whose name had been erased from his company's legacy. The wife who had signed divorce papers in a cold, windowless room, leaving behind everything they had built together without taking a single penny of his fortune. Back then, the board of directors and corrupt executives had convinced him she was a liability, a quiet companion who brought no real value to a billion-dollar business. Now she wasn't standing in the shadows of his success. She was stepping up to the podium as the ambitious woman who had orchestrated the largest hostile business acquisition in modern history. Elena adjusted the microphone, her calm, measured gaze sweeping across the crowded room until it settled directly on Adrian's pale, stunned face. The entire room held its breath, waiting for the powerful female CEO to announce her first command over the empire she now controlled. 4 years ago, Elena began, her voice smooth, low, and carrying an undeniable authority that echoed through the auditorium. I left this building with nothing but a promise that one day, my work would speak for itself without anyone else's name written beside it. Today that promise is fulfilled. Adrian felt the floor beneath him tilt. How had the woman he once loved, the quiet, brilliant engineer he had failed to protect, managed to execute a silent corporate takeover of his entire life's work right under his nose? And as the truth of past betrayals began to unravel before the world's press, a haunting question hung in the air. Had Elena come to destroy the billionaire CEO who broke her heart, or was this dramatic business empire takeover just the first step in a much larger, life-altering game? Long before she became the enigmatic figure behind a global tech empire, Elena was the brilliant mind working in absolute silence. Growing up as the daughter of a modest university librarian and a software mechanic, Elena had possessed an intuitive grasp of code from the time she was a girl. Where others saw chaotic lines of text, she saw patterns, logic, and emotional structure. But her greatest flaw had always been her profound modesty and deep capacity for trust. She had never craved the bright lights of press conferences, high society galas, or glossy magazine covers. Her deepest desire was simply to create groundbreaking innovation that would make the world safer, smarter, and more connected. When she met Adrian in their late 20s, he was an energetic, fiercely charismatic startup founder with big dreams, an infectious laugh, and an empty bank account. Adrian was a visionary with an instinct for leadership, but he lacked the intricate technical genius required to build the foundational architecture of his grand vision. Seeing his passion, Elena had poured her soul into his dream. Night after night, in the cramped kitchen of their small rented apartment, she had built the core algorithms that would later become the bedrock of Cole Enterprises. She had crafted a revolutionary artificial intelligence system capable of predictive data analysis, a technology that was years ahead of its time. Out of fierce love and unwavering devotion to her husband, she had insisted that Adrian take the spotlight. She took no title, no corporate equity, and no public credit. To the world, Adrian Cole was the brilliant young billionaire CEO who had revolutionized the tech industry overnight. To Adrian, in those early golden years, Elena was his rock, his sanctuary, and the love of his life. "We are a team, Elle," Adrian used to whisper into her hair during those late nights, holding her tight against his chest as her fingers flew across the keyboard. "When I win, we win. Everything I build is for our future." But as the company grew into a multi-billion-dollar business, the pure air of their humble beginnings was slowly poisoned by corporate greed and ruthless ambition. Enter Dominic Vance, a polished, sharp-tongued senior executive whose calculated charm masked a deeply ruthless nature. Dominic was brought in to manage corporate strategy and international expansion. Alongside him was Victoria Sterling, a cold, calculating board member with family old money connections who viewed Elena not as a contributor, but as an unsophisticated obstacle to Cole Enterprises' global prestige. Dominic and Victoria quickly recognized that Elena held the real key to the company's technical superiority. But they also recognized her vulnerability. She had never signed formal employment contracts, and her contributions were kept in offline repositories to protect the company's trade secrets. Gradually, Dominic began whispering doubts into Adrian's ear. "She's holding the company back, Adrian," Dominic would urge over expensive scotch in executive lounges. "Investors want to see a world-class engineering team led by industry titans, not a quiet wife working from home without an Ivy League degree. If news gets out that our core AI was built by an uncertified spouse, our valuation will drop by 30% overnight." Simultaneously, Victoria began orchestrating subtle social wedge issues, inviting Adrian to high society events while making Elena feel unwelcome, out of place, and small. As the pressure from the board of directors mounted and Cole Enterprises prepped for its massive public offering, Adrian changed. The warm, passionate husband who had once valued love over money was slowly replaced by a hardened, cautious billionaire businessman obsessed with power, stock prices, and corporate leadership. The turning point came when a vital, unreleased version of Elena's predictive AI was leaked to a rival firm. Dominic expertly staged a trail of digital evidence, framing Elena for the security breach and claiming she was secretly collaborating with competitors out of jealousy over the company's upcoming IPO. Instead of standing by the woman who had built his empire from scratch, Adrian allowed his fear of financial ruin to cloud his judgment. Distant, paranoid, and surrounded by corrupt advisors, he confronted her in his office, demanding answers for a crime she had never committed. "I gave you my whole heart, Adrian." Elena had wept, her voice trembling with a terrifying mixture of grief and disbelief as she stood before his massive mahogany desk. "I wrote every single line of that code to protect you. How can you look into my eyes and believe I would betray our life?" Adrian had stared back at her, his expression unreadable behind a mask of corporate coldness, though inside, a part of him was already breaking. "The data doesn't lie, Elena. The board wants a clean break. For the safety of the firm, we need to end this." When Elena realized that the man she loved had chosen corporate prestige over her loyalty, something shifted deep within her soul. The soft, accommodating wife vanished, replaced by a fierce, quiet resilience. She signed the divorce papers without taking a dime of his fortune, refusing alimony or settlements. As she walked out of the glass doors of Cole Enterprises 4 years ago, leaving behind her life, her love, and her stolen work, she had looked Adrian in the eyes one last time and uttered the words that had haunted him every night since. "One day the world will know my name, without yours beside it." The day after signing the divorce papers, Elena moved into a cramped, third-floor apartment on the outskirts of Brooklyn. The walls were thin, the radiator clanked through the night, and her bank account held only a modest sum of personal savings. But on the worn oak table in the center of her small living room sat a single high-performance laptop, And inside her mind lived a mind of unmatched technical brilliance. She didn't spend her days weeping over the ruined past. Instead, she channeled her grief, betrayal, and heartbreak into relentless creation. Within 2 months, Elena reached out to two of the only people who had ever seen her true potential. Julian Vance, an eccentric, fiercely loyal former chief network architect who had been pushed out of Cole Enterprises for questioning Dominic's ethics, and Claire Mercer, a sharp, brilliant cybersecurity specialist with a penchant for dismantling complex corporate firewalls. Gathered around Elena's kitchen table over takeaway coffee, the trio laid the foundation for what would become Aegis Global. Adrian and his board think artificial intelligence is just a cash cow for predictive marketing and high-frequency trading, Elena told them, her dark eyes flashing with intense focus as she brought up her new blueprint on the screen. They are building tools for short-term profit. We are going to build an ecosystem for the future. A decentralized, unhackable quantum-encrypted framework that integrates sustainable energy grids, global medical logistics, and real-time threat detection. Julian whistled softly, leaning forward. Building a system like this without corporate backing will take years. If Cole Enterprises catches wind of what you're writing, their legal team will bury us in non-competes before we can even compile the code. They won't catch wind, Elena replied coolly, her voice firm with newfound authority. Because Aegis won't exist in the press. We won't raise venture capital from traditional firms. We will build in absolute silence. For 3 long years, while Adrian Cole graced the covers of global business magazines as the undisputed titan of the tech industry, Elena operated as a shadow. Working 16-hour days, she refined her new architecture, creating a system so far advanced that when she finally deployed it quietly to select private infrastructure firms, the response was instantaneous. Aegis Global didn't just compete in the tech industry, it redefined it. Governments contracted Aegis for national security infrastructure. Fortune 500 companies secretly migrated their cloud systems to Aegis's secure servers to prevent corporate espionage. Yet through a complex web of private trusts, international holding companies, and bulletproof legal shields engineered by Clara, the true identity of Aegis's founder remained a complete mystery to the public. The world only knew her by a singular code name, Vesper. While Elena's empire surged across continents, Cole Enterprises was quietly rotting from within. Blinded by his own ego and reliant on Dominic's toxic strategies, Adrian began prioritizing rapid monetization over true innovation. Dominic cut costs on system security, squeezed middle management, and pushed half-baked AI updates to satisfy quarterly earnings calls. Worse still, Dominic and Victoria were quietly siphoning millions into offshore accounts while feeding Adrian false reports about the company's financial stability. Then came the catastrophic turning point. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Manhattan, a massive cyberattack struck Cole Enterprises' central data hub. The very AI system that Elena had originally coded, which had gone unupgraded for years under Dominic's cost-cutting measures, collapsed like a house of cards. Client records were compromised, international trade networks halted, and Cole Enterprises' stock tanked by 40% in a single afternoon of chaotic panic. If you're sitting on the edge of your seat right now wondering how Elena turns this crisis into her ultimate move, smash that like button and make sure to subscribe. I want to hear from you. Do you think Adrian deserves a second chance at redemption, or should Elena tear his empire down completely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Inside his corner office, Adrian stood before a wall of glass, staring out at the storm-swept skyline as emergency red lights flashed on his phone lines. The board of directors was demanding his resignation. Investors were pulling out by the minute. He was facing total financial ruin and public humiliation. Dominic burst into the office, his expensive tie loosened, sweat shining on his forehead. Adrian, we have to file for emergency bankruptcy protection. There's no way out. The market has completely lost faith in our architecture. Before Adrian could answer, his personal terminal chimed with a high-priority alert. A single encrypted message had bypassed all of Cole Enterprises' firewalls, popping up on his central display. It was an automated notification from the New York Stock Exchange. Notice of majority acquisition. 51% of circulating voting shares of Cole Enterprises have been purchased via emergency liquidity buyouts by Aegis Global Holdings. Adrian stared at the screen, his heart hammering violently against his ribs. Aegis Global? The mysterious multi-trillion-dollar tech giant that had refused all of his partnership offers over the past 2 years? Attached to the notification was a brief, private digital note directed solely to his secure email. I told you the world would know my name without yours beside it. See you in the boardroom tomorrow morning, Adrian. Adrian's breath hitched in his chest as the truth hit him like a physical blow. The mystery founder of the world's greatest global tech empire wasn't a foreign syndicate or a rival tech mogul. It was Elena, the quiet wife he had abandoned, the genius he had allowed his executives to break. And now she had returned not just to save his dying company, but to take absolute control of it. The emergency board meeting of Cole Enterprises was less than an hour away, and the Grand Glass Tower was in absolute chaos. Executives paced the corridors with sweat soaking through their tailored suits, frantically clutching financial printouts. News networks flashed red alerts across every screen in the lobby, speculating on the identity of the mysterious entity that had swallowed one of Wall Street's biggest tech titans in a single night. Inside the executive holding suite, Adrian sat alone, his head buried in his hands. The shock of discovering that Vesper, the legendary, unreachable founder of Aegis Global, was actually Elena had shattered his entire reality. For 4 years he had convinced himself that he had made the necessary choice for his company. He had buried his grief under endless work, luxury apartments and corporate accolades, trying to forget the crushed look in her eyes on the day she walked out of his life. He looked up as the heavy oak door clicked open. Elena stepped into the room. She was accompanied only by Clara Mercer, who carried a sleek leather briefcase, leaving her private security team outside the door. Up close, the change in Elena was breathtaking. The shy, soft-spoken woman who used to wear oversized sweaters and tie her hair up in messy buns was gone. In her place stood an imposing, radiant businesswoman whose quiet confidence made the air in the room feel electric. Yet as her dark eyes met his, Adrian caught a passing flicker of something deeply human, a shadow of the shared past they had both tried to bury. "Elena," Adrian said, his voice raw as he stood up from the conference table. He took a hesitant step toward her, his hands hovering in the air between them. "But I can barely believe it's really you. It's Yo Vance in this building, Adrian," she replied smoothly, her tone cool, measured, and completely devoid of malice. "Let's keep this professional." Adrian flinched as if she had struck him, but he nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in his throat. How did you build Aegis in 4 years without anyone knowing? How did you pull off an acquisition of this scale without a single leak? Because while you were spending millions on public relations and glossy press releases, I was focused on innovation," Elena said, stepping closer to the glass window overlooking the city. "You forgot what made us successful in the first place, Adrian. You let greed and corrupt advisors dictate your vision. You traded real code for market hype, and when your security cracked, your empire collapsed." Before Adrian could answer, the door flew open again. Dominic Vance stormed into the suite, flanked by Victoria Sterling and 2 corporate attorneys. Dominic's face was flushed with anger, his eyes fixed on Elena with open hostility. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Dominic demanded, glaring at Elena before turning to Adrian. "Adrian, why are you letting your disgraced ex-wife stand in our private suite? We are in the middle of a national security crisis. The board is assembling, and we need to file for structural protection before this rogue Aegis syndicate strips our remaining assets." Clara let out a short, amused laugh, opening her briefcase and pulling out a thick stack of certified legal documents. "I check your tone, Mr. Vance. As of 6 o'clock this morning, Aegis Global holds 51% of all voting shares. You are looking at your new principal owner." Victoria Sterling gasped, her cold composure instantly cracking as she gripped the back of a leather chair. "This is preposterous. A hostile takeover based on dumped shares during a system glitch? We will tie this up in federal courts for the next decade." "You won't," Elena said calmly, turning around to face them with her arms folded neatly across her chest. "Because if you take this to court, the first thing the discovery process will unearth is the secondary ledger from your offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands." Dominic froze. The color drained from his face so fast he looked almost ghostly in the bright morning light. "Did you really think I wouldn't track the origin of the leak that ruined my name 4 years ago?" Elena continued, her voice dropping into a quiet, lethal register. I didn't just buy this company to save its technology, Dominic. I bought it because I have the digital paper trail proving that you and Victoria intentionally leaked my original AI framework to cut a private deal with an overseas competitor. Adrian turned to Dominic, his eyes widening in horror as the pieces of the past began to fit together. What is she talking about, Dominic? She's lying, Adrian. Dominic stammered, his confidence completely evaporating as he backed toward the door. She's trying to manipulate you just like she did before the divorce. She's bitter because we removed her from the company. She doesn't need to lie, Adrian whispered, looking between Dominic's frantic expression and Elena's steady, unyielding gaze. For the first time in 4 years, the veil of corporate deceit lifted from Adrian's eyes, revealing the horrifying truth. He had ruined his marriage, betrayed his soulmate, and handed his life's work over to the very monsters who had framed her. A profound, crushing wave of guilt washed over Adrian, making it hard for him to breathe. He looked back at Elena, his golden brown eyes swimming with unbearable regret. Elena. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Adrian, Elena said softly, a subtle trace of sorrow bleeding through her armor for just a brief second. It was easier to believe I was a traitor than to face the people sitting at your own table. She turned toward the double doors leading to the main boardroom, where the entire board of directors sat waiting in terrified silence. Now, Elena said, adjusting her jacket as Clara stepped beside her, it's time to clean house. The atmosphere inside the grand boardroom was suffocating. High above the noisy streets of Manhattan, 20 board members sat frozen in their leather chairs, watching in breathless silence as Elena walked to the head of the polished mahogany table. Clara laid a glowing tablet down beside the master terminal, linking Aegis Global's central network directly into Cole Enterprises' mainframe. Adrian stood near the glass wall, his chest heavy with a sickening mixture of awe and self-loathing. 4 years of blind trust in his executive team had stripped away his judgment, but watching Elena command the room with such cold, breathtaking precision shattered whatever remaining illusions he held about his own leadership. Members of the board, Elena announced, her voice echoing clearly off the glass walls. As of 8 o'clock this morning, Cole Enterprises has been formally acquired as a subsidiary of Aegis Global. The previous executive strategy is officially dissolved. Victoria Sterling slammed her hands on the table, her face flushed with desperation. You cannot simply walk in here and erase years of corporate governance. We built this company into a multi-billion-dollar business long after you walked away. You didn't build anything, Victoria, Elena replied, her dark eyes flashing with unyielding authority. You bled it dry. Elena tapped the screen on her tablet. Instantly, the massive high-definition monitors lining the boardroom walls lit up, displaying a complex, glowing web of financial transactions, encrypted email threads and server logs. 4 years ago, Elena continued, stepping slowly around the perimeter of the table, a critical security breach crippled Cole Enterprises' prototype AI. That breach was used as grounds to sever my relationship with this company and cast doubt on my integrity. But while you were all celebrating your public offering, my team was tracing the digital footprint of that leak. She brought up an unredacted set of offshore bank transfers. The security key used to access my private repository was not hacked from the outside, Elena said, her voice dropping into a razor-sharp register. It was generated from inside this very building, using an administrative override key assigned exclusively to Chief Strategy Officer Dominic Vance. A collective gasp rippled through the board members. Several executives turned to glare at Dominic, who stood paralyzed near the back in trance, his knuckles white as he gripped his suit jacket. And the recipient of that leaked code? Elena pressed a key, pulling up a series of private contract agreements. A dummy corporation registered in Singapore, owned entirely by Victoria Sterling's family trust. You two deliberately sabotaged your own company's core asset, framed me for the breach, and then bought back the stolen intellectual property through an offshore shell to launch a competing venture behind Adrian's back. Adrian felt as though the floor beneath him had dropped into a bottomless abyss. He turned toward Dominic and Victoria, his body trembling with raw, explosive fury. Is this true? Adrian demanded, his voice cracking with a deadly rumble that made even the senior board members shrink back. I trusted you. I gave you control over this entire organization. I gave up my wife because you swore she was a liability. Adrian, listen to me, Dominic stammered, raising his hands defensively as he took a step back. It was a business decision. The market was shifting, she was an uncertified variable, we had to secure the capital. You ruined my life. Adrian roared, slamming his fist onto the marble console so hard the glass water pitcher rattled. You turned me against the only person who ever truly cared about this company, and about me. Save your outrage for the authorities, Adrian, Elena interrupted coolly, though her eyes softened for a brief, fleeting second as she looked at his tortured expression. Clara has already transmitted these files to the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Justice. Federal marshals are waiting in the lobby. As two security officers escorted a pale, trembling Dominic and a weeping Victoria out of the boardroom, a heavy, deafening silence descended upon the room. The remaining board members sat completely subdued, realizing their authority had been totally dismantled. Elena turned back to the screen, bringing up a live diagnostic of Cole Enterprises' failing servers. Effective immediately, Aegis Global will deploy its proprietary quantum shield across all Cole infrastructure. The market panic will end within the hour. But as for the executive leadership, she looked directly at Adrian. Adrian Cole is officially relieved of his duties as Chief Executive Officer. The words hit Adrian like a physical blow, stripping the breath from his lungs. Yet looking into Elena's eyes, he saw no cruelty, no petty desire for revenge. He saw only absolute clarity, the tragic, undeniable consequence of his own choices. He had built his life on a foundation of sand, trusting snake oil salesmen over the woman who had poured her heart into his foundation. If this dramatic twist left you breathless, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment below telling me, if you were in Adrian's shoes, would you fight to earn Elena's forgiveness, or would you walk away in shame? I understand, Adrian whispered, his voice stripped of all corporate pride. He took off his golden executive pin, setting it gently on the mahogany table. The company is yours, Elena. It always was. He turned and walked toward the exit, his posture heavy with defeat. But as he reached the double doors, Elena's voice called out softly behind him, carrying a strange, unexpected weight that paused his step. Adrian, stay in the building. We aren't finished yet. The central executive suite was quiet, isolated from the chaotic buzz of the lower floors where federal agents were conducting their investigation. Outside the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, heavy rain brushed against the Manhattan skyline. Adrian stood near the corner of the room, staring down at his reflection in the dark glass. For 4 years this office had been his sanctuary, a testament to his status and power. Now stripped of his title and his company, it felt empty, hollow and cold. The heavy oak door opened and Elena walked in alone. She carried a single digital folder, setting it quietly onto the desk. Dominic and Victoria are in federal custody, Elena said softly, stepping toward the center of the room. The SEC has suspended trading on the stolen shares, and Aegis engineers are already stabilizing your core servers. Cole Enterprises won't collapse. Adrian turned around slowly. He looked exhausted, the sharp confidence that had defined him for a decade completely shattered. Thank you for saving the company, Elena. But we both know you didn't do it for the brand name. You did it to finish what we started. I did it to protect my life's work, Elena corrected gently, her tone measured. And to make sure the truth was finally spoken. Adrian took a slow step toward her, his eyes filled with profound regret. When you walked out of that office 4 years ago, I told myself I was doing what a leader had to do. I convinced myself that the numbers didn't lie, that the board knew best. But the truth is, I was terrified. I was afraid that without their money, without their approval, everything I had built would vanish. He looked directly into her dark eyes, his voice trembling. I let my vanity blind me to the only person who was actually loyal to me. I destroyed us, Elena. I threw away the only genuine thing in my life for a title that meant nothing. Elena stared at him, keeping her composure steady, though a slight tension tightened in her jaw. You didn't just doubt my loyalty, Adrian. You doubted my character. You sat across from me in this very room and looked at me like I was a thief. You chose Dominic's polished lies over 4 years of late nights in our kitchen, building something out of nothing. I know, Adrian whispered, the pain in his voice unmistakable. And there isn't a single day since that I haven't hated myself for it. Every time I looked at a milestone report or signed a new contract, All I could hear was your voice telling me that one day the world would know your name without mine beside it. You were right. You didn't need me, Elena. I was the one who needed you. He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn leather-bound notebook. The very journal Elena had used to draft the initial logic algorithms for their first prototype years ago. He set it carefully on the desk between them. I kept it, Adrian said softly. Even when the lawyers told me to destroy all previous technical notes after the divorce. I couldn't let it go. It was the only proof I had left that once, a long time ago, we were building something real. Elena looked down at the frayed notebook, a subtle shift appearing in her steady expression. For a brief moment, the formidable CEO of Aegis Global vanished, leaving behind the brilliant, quiet engineer who had once shared a humble dream with the man standing before her. Keeping a notebook doesn't change what happened, Adrian, she said, her voice dropping into a quiet, solemn register. Rebuilding code is simple. Rebuilding trust is impossible. I'm not asking for your trust, Adrian said, using the old nickname for the first time in years. I'm not asking for my job back or for a place in your empire. I just needed you to hear me say it out loud. I am sorry. For all of it. Elena stood silent for a long moment, letting his words hang in the still air of the office. She picked up the worn leather notebook, tracing her thumb over its frayed edges, before looking back up at him. The board meeting reconvenes in 20 minutes, Elena said, stepping back toward the door. Your formal resignation will be accepted, but under the terms of the restructuring, Aegis will not liquidate your personal remaining founder equity. You won't be ruined, Adrian. She paused at the doorway, turning her head slightly. Where you go from here is entirely up to you. The press conference in the main lobby of the Cole Enterprises Tower was a wall of blinding camera flashes and frantic questions. Over 100 journalists had crammed into the glass atrium, their voices echoing off the polished marble floors. On the elevated podium stood Clara Mercer, flanked by Aegis Global's legal and technical directors. Behind them, a massive digital display showed the new corporate structure. A seamless integration that dissolved Cole Enterprises as an independent entity and absorbed its infrastructure directly into Aegis's global network. Effective immediately, Clara announced into the sea of microphones, her tone crisp and unshakable. Aegis Global has finalized the absolute acquisition of Cole Enterprises. All proprietary systems have been secured, all fraudulent contracts executed by former management have been voided, and federal authorities have been granted complete access to internal ledgers. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal raised his hand, shouting above the din, Ms. Mercer. What is the status of Adrian Cole? Is the former CEO facing criminal charges alongside Vance and Sterling? Mr. Cole was completely cleared of any criminal complicity by federal investigators this afternoon, Clara replied smoothly. However, Mr. Cole has tendered his full unconditioned resignation as CEO and stepped down from the board of directors. He will retain non-voting founder equity, but he will hold no operational authority within Aegis Global. Inside the high-level operational suite 3 floors above, Elena watched the live broadcast on a silent monitor. Julian Vance stepped into the room, holding 2 steaming mugs of black coffee. He handed one to Elena, leaning against the edge of the glass desk as he looked down at the bustling lobby below. The market response is staggering, Julian said, a soft, proud smile touching his lips. Aegis stock jumped 18% within 20 minutes of the press release. The Board of Trade just validated the integration. You didn't just survive their attempt to bury you, you rebuilt the entire landscape. Elena took a slow sip of coffee, her eyes reflecting the glowing stock tickers rolling across the bottom of the screen. It was never about beating them, Julian. It was about making sure the foundation was solid. When people build on lies, the structure always collapses under its own weight. We just happened to be standing there with the blueprint when it fell. And Adrian? Julian asked gently, searching her face. He left his office an hour ago. Clara said he signed every single surrender document without contesting a single line. No severance demands, no legal pushback, no media statements. He just walked out. Elena turned away from the monitor, walking over to the wide glass window that overlooked Fifth Avenue. Down on the rain-slicked pavement below, amidst the swarm of media vans and security vehicles, she caught a fleeting glimpse of a tall figure in a dark overcoat stepping into an unassuming black sedan, disappearing into the city traffic without a single look back. She felt a quiet, heavy stillness settle in her chest, not the burning bitterness that had fueled her late nights in Brooklyn, nor the triumphant high of a corporate victory. It was simply closure. Adrian made his choices 4 years ago, Elena said softly, her voice steady and clear. He spent those years chasing the shadow of success. Now he has to figure out who he is without it. Julian nodded slowly, respecting the quiet boundary in her tone. He picked up a thick tablet from the desk and tapped the screen, transitioning the conversation back to the future. The global architecture deployment starts tomorrow morning, Julian said, his energy shifting back to the work. Every data center from Tokyo to London needs your final authorization key to begin the system migration. Elena looked down at her hands. The hands that had once written code in a tiny kitchen, the hands that had quietly built a multi-trillion-dollar empire, and the hands that now held the absolute future of global technology. She picked up her tablet, entered her master security key and pressed confirm. Let's begin. 6 months after the historic takeover of Cole Enterprises, the global tech landscape had fundamentally shifted. What had once been a volatile industry driven by quarterly hype and fragile security was now anchored by Aegis Global's bulletproof quantum-encrypted architecture. Stock markets stabilized, municipal infrastructure across 3 continents ran with unprecedented efficiency, and the name Vesper, now openly tied to Elena, had become synonymous with ethical innovation and technical perfection. Inside the quiet, sunlit top floor of Aegis Global's new headquarters, Elena stood before a sweeping floor-to-ceiling glass wall overlooking Central Park. The glass tower wasn't cold or clinical like the old Cole Enterprises executive suite. It was designed with open, collaborative spaces, warm wood finishes and state-of-the-art research labs where young, unheralded engineers worked without fear of corporate espionage or stolen credit. Clara Mercer walked into the office, holding a leather-bound folder. She smiled warmly, setting a coffee cup on Elena's desk. Quarterly integration reports are in, Clara said, leaning against the desk. The transition of the former Cole infrastructure is 100% complete. Every single engineer who was underpaid or marginalized under Dominic's leadership has been promoted, given full equity options, and integrated into our primary R&D teams. And the legal proceedings? Elena asked, turning from the window with a calm, composed expression. Dominic Vance was sentenced to 12 years for corporate espionage, wire fraud and grand larceny, Clara replied smoothly. Victoria Sterling reached a plea deal. She surrendered all offshore holdings and is serving 5 years. Neither of them will ever step foot in a corporate boardroom again. Elena nodded slowly, taking a sip of coffee. There was no joy in hearing those sentences, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. What about Adrian? Elena asked softly, her tone neutral, yet carrying a subtle, reflective weight. Clara opened the folder, pulling out a brief press release and a set of public filings. He's completely withdrawn from the tech scene in New York. He liquidated 50% of his remaining non-voting founder equity, most of which he donated anonymously to STEM education funds for underprivileged women. From what my contacts say, he's living quietly in upstate New York, working with a small green tech nonprofit that builds clean water filtration software. Elena looked down at the report. A faint, gentle smile touched her lips, not of satisfaction or triumph but of genuine relief. Adrian was finally building something with his own hands, away from the toxic glare of Wall Street and corporate vanity. He was finding his way back to the man he used to be before power corrupted his judgment. Good, Elena said quietly, closing the file. He's where he needs to be. Julian Vance stepped into the office, carrying a glowing tablet displaying the blueprint for Aegis's next major global initiative. An open-source, non-profit digital safety network designed to protect small startups from cyber-sabotage and predatory corporate takeovers. We're ready for your final sign-off on the open-source initiative, Al, Julian said, his eyes bright with excitement. This will ensure that no young creator ever gets squeezed out or framed by another Dominic Vance. Elena walked over to her desk, looking at the 2 people who had stood by her through the dark nights in Brooklyn, through the silent build, and through the intense corporate war that had reshaped their lives. She wasn't just a survivor of a ruined marriage or a victim of stolen genius. She was the architect of her own destiny, a woman who had taken the shattered pieces of her past and forged them into an unshakable empire. She picked up her digital stylus and signed her name across the central decree. Elena Vance, founder and CEO of Aegis Global. It's time, Elena said, looking up at her team with absolute clarity and warmth. Let's build a future that lasts. 2 years later, the soft autumn afternoon sun streamed through the wide glass windows of a community technology center in upstate New York. Inside the bustling workshop, a dozen young students sat around wooden workbenches, assembling affordable water monitoring sensors designed for rural agricultural towns. At the center of the room, wearing a simple denim shirt with rolled-up sleeves, was Adrian. He was patiently guiding a young girl through her first lines of code, his posture relaxed, his face free of the tense, exhausted strain that had once defined his years at Cole Enterprises. He didn't miss the glass towers, the press conferences, or the multi-billion-dollar valuations. In the quiet solitude of the Hudson Valley, rebuilding his life from the ground up had given him something money could never buy: peace, purpose, and a genuine connection to the work. A soft chime sounded near the entrance as the glass door opened. Adrian looked up, his breath catching slightly as a familiar figure stepped inside. Elena stood near the threshold, dressed in an elegant cream coat, her dark hair catching the warm sunlight. She looked around the bright, energetic workshop with a soft, appreciative smile before her eyes met his. The room quieted as Adrian excused himself from the bench, stepping forward to meet her near the central display. Elena, Adrian said, his voice warm, grounded, and entirely lacking his former corporate posturing. What brings the CEO of Aegis Global to a quiet town in the valley? I was in Albany reviewing our regional green grid integration, Elena replied gently, her dark eyes searching his face with a calm, friendly familiarity. Clara mentioned your team had developed a low-cost filtration algorithm. I wanted to see it in person. Adrian smiled, leading her over to a workbench near the window. He brought up a modest, beautifully optimized code repository on a single monitor. It's nothing fancy compared to your quantum framework. It's just simple, clean logic designed to run on low-power hardware for towns that can't afford massive infrastructure. Elena leaned in, scanning the lines of code. A genuine, radiant smile touched her face. It's elegant, Adrian. It's concise, functional, and built with heart. It reminds me of the work we used to do at our old kitchen table. Except this time I'm doing the actual work, Adrian said with a quiet, humble chuckle, looking down at his hands. He paused, his expression turning serious yet deeply peaceful. I never properly thanked you, Elena, for not destroying me 6 months ago, for giving me the chance to start over. You didn't need my permission to start over, Adrian, Elena said softly, turning to face him. You just needed to stop running from who you were. They walked out onto the wooden porch overlooking the quiet autumn river, the crisp breeze rustling the falling leaves around them. For the first time in 6 long years, there was no weight of stolen code between them, no hidden corporate schemes, no bitter regrets, and no unsaid apologies. How is Aegis? Adrian asked, looking out over the water. It's thriving, Elena said, her voice filled with quiet pride. We're launching our global open source initiative next month. Every independent innovator in 50 countries will have free access to our security protocols. No one will ever have their work stolen or erased again. A true empire, Adrian murmured softly, a look of profound respect in his golden brown eyes. Built by the brilliant woman who created it. Elena looked out at the river, feeling a profound sense of completeness wash over her heart. The pain of the past had long since dissolved, leaving behind only the solid, unshakable strength of a woman who had reclaimed her life, her name, and her purpose. I have a flight back to New York in an hour, Elena said, turning back toward him with a warm, steady smile. Keep building good things, Adrian. Always, Elle, Adrian replied gently, extending his hand. Elena took his hand, giving it a soft, firm squeeze of mutual respect and final farewell, before turning to walk down the porch steps toward her waiting vehicle. As the car pulled away down the winding valley road, Elena looked back once through the window. Adrian was already walking back inside the workshop, returning to the bench to teach the next generation of dreamers. Elena leaned back into her seat, looking out at the open sky ahead. She had built a global tech empire, exposed the shadows of the past, and redefined the future of technology, not out of vengeance but out of truth. And as the sun set over the horizon, her name stood clear, brilliant, and entirely her own.